The stars were watching Earth die, and they were happy about it. Jinha Park stood at the observation deck of Luna Station, his hands pressed against the cold glass. Beyond the moon's gray surface, space looked wrong. Where once there had been empty blackness dotted with distant suns, now there was a wall. A shimmering blue-green wall that stretched in every direction, wrapping around the entire solar system like a giant bubble. The aliens had built a cage around humanity, and they called it mercy. "Sir, the council transmission is starting," said Lieutenant Kim from behind him. Jinha nodded but didn't turn around. He had been Earth's first ambassador to the stars. Now he might be its last. 3 months ago, everything had been different. First contact had finally happened. The great ships of the Galactic Dominion had arrived at the edge of the solar system, their hulls gleaming like jewels against the void. They came with gifts, with knowledge, with promises of a greater universe waiting for humanity. They also came with chains. Jinha remembered that first meeting aboard the flagship Eternal Glory, the Dominion's supreme regent, a creature that looked like a cross between a spider and a crystal formation, had expected Jinha to kneel. Not just bow politely, but actually get down on his knees like some kind of servant. "All new species must show proper respect," the regent had said through its translator device. "Kneel, human, and accept your place in the natural order." Jinha had looked around the great chamber. Dozens of alien species stood watching. Some had scales, others had fur. Some looked like walking plants, others like living rocks. All of them were on their knees. "No," Jinha had said simply. The word had echoed in the chamber like a gunshot. Several aliens had gasped. The regent's crystal body had flickered with what Jinha later learned was surprise. "You refuse?" the regent asked. "I refuse," Jinha confirmed. "Humans don't kneel to anyone. We stand on our own feet, or we don't stand at all." That had been the beginning of the end. Now, as Jinha watched the energy barrier pulse with alien technology, he wondered if he had made the right choice. The Dominion had given humanity 1 week to reconsider. When Earth's government backed Jinha's decision, when every nation on the planet voted to reject the Dominion's terms, the aliens had acted swiftly. They built the wall in 3 days. "Ambassador Park," Lieutenant Kim said again, more urgently this time. "The transmission." Jinha finally turned around. The communication screen showed the familiar symbol of the Galactic Dominion, a spiral galaxy with 47 stars representing the member species. Humanity would never be the 40-8th. The Supreme Regent's image flickered to life on the screen. Its crystal body cast rainbow patterns across the room. "Primitive species of the third planet," the Regent began, its voice cold and formal. "You have chosen isolation over integration. You have chosen pride over wisdom. Very well. By Imperial Decree 7749, your solar system is now designated a primitive containment zone." Jinha felt his jaw tighten, but he said nothing. "No vessel will leave your system," the regent continued. "No communication will reach beyond your barrier. You will have what you wanted, complete independence. Use it wisely, for you will have nothing else." The transmission ended abruptly. The symbol faded, leaving only the reflection of Jinha's tired face on the black screen. "Sir," Lieutenant Kim whispered, "what do we do now?" Before Jinha could answer, his communicator buzzed. It was Harin Song calling from the research station on Europa. At 28, she was the youngest xenobiologist ever appointed to study alien life forms. Now, she might be the only one who ever got the chance. "Jinha," Harin's voice crackled through the cum. "You need to see this. Something's happening to the wildlife here. Something strange." "Strange how?" Jinha asked, walking toward the communication panel. "The ice whales," Harin said. "They're growing, not just bigger, they're growing new organs. Organs I've never seen before. And their behavior, they're acting almost intelligent, more intelligent than before." Jinha frowned. Europa's ice whales were simple creatures, barely more advanced than Earth's jellyfish. "Are you sure the readings are correct?" "I'm looking at one right now through the observation portal," Harin replied. "Jinha, it's looking back at me." "Not just looking, I think it's studying me." A chill ran down Jinha's spine that had nothing. to do with the station's cold air. Meanwhile, in the underground research facility beneath Seoul, Quan Li was studying the barrier itself. As Earth's top military engineer, he had been tasked with finding a way through the alien wall. What he found instead was far more interesting. Quan ran his hand along the energy readings displayed on his screen. The barrier wasn't just keeping humans in, it was changing everything inside. The energy field was somehow accelerating natural processes, speeding up evolution, pushing every living thing toward rapid adaptation. "It's not a prison," he murmured to himself, his eyes wide with realization. "It's a crucible." His assistant, Dr. Yoon, looked up from her own console. "What did you say, sir?" "The aliens," Quan said, turning to face her. "They think they're protecting the galaxy from us. But what they've actually done is created the perfect conditions for humanity to evolve at an impossible rate." Dr. Yoon shook her head. "That's not possible. Evolution takes millions of years. Normal evolution does," Quan agreed. "But this barrier is pumping exotic energy into every living cell on every planet in our system. It's like they've turned the solar system into a massive evolutionary accelerator." Back on Luna Station, Jinha was processing Harin's report when his own body gave him the first sign of what was coming. He looked down at his hands and saw something impossible. His skin was slightly luminescent, glowing with a faint blue light that matched the barrier surrounding them. He wasn't afraid. Instead, he felt a strange sense of excitement, of possibility. "Lieutenant Kim," he said quietly, "send a message to Earth. Tell them to start monitoring all biological activity on every world in the system. Something tells me we're about to discover what humans can really do when we're pushed into a corner." As Jinha spoke, the barrier pulsed brighter, as if responding to his words. Across the solar system, on every world and station and ship, humanity was beginning to change. The aliens had tried to cage them. Instead, they had given humanity exactly what it needed to become something the galaxy had never seen before. The real story was just beginning. 50 years had passed since the galaxy forgot about humanity. In the Grand Council chambers of the Galactic Dominion, Supreme Regent Vexstar reviewed the quarterly reports from across 47 star systems. Trade was flowing, wars were controlled, and the great machine of galactic civilization hummed along as it had for thousands of years. The report on the Sol system was exactly one line long. "Primitive containment zone, no activity detected." "Good," Vexstar muttered, his crystal body flickering with satisfaction. "The humans are probably extinct by now, or back to hitting rocks together." He had no idea how wrong he was. Beyond the barrier, in what had once been called the solar system, something extraordinary had been growing in the darkness. The humans hadn't just survived. They had become something the galaxy couldn't imagine in its wildest dreams. Jinha Park, now 73 years old, stood in what used to be the command center of Luna Station. But Luna Station didn't exist anymore. In its place was something that defied description, a structure that seemed to be made of crystallized thought and living metal, floating in space without any visible support. Jinha himself looked nothing like the man who had refused to kneel 50 years ago. His hair was silver, but his eyes burned with an inner light that could be seen from across a room. His skin had the same blue glow it had developed decades ago, but now it pulsed with patterns that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that touched something deep in the listener's mind. "Report, Harin," he said, though his lips barely moved. The words seemed to come from the air itself. Harin's song materialized beside him, but not by walking through a door. She simply appeared, her form shifting from energy to matter like morning mist becoming human. At 78, she looked older than 30, but her eyes held depths that spoke of decades spent exploring the edges of what life could become. "The transformation is complete on all worlds," she said, her voice carrying the same strange harmonics as Jinha's. "Mars has awakened. The entire planet is now a single living organism, thinking thoughts we can barely comprehend. Venus has learned to control its storms. They dance in patterns that generate energy for the inner colonies. And Earth?" Jinha asked. Harin smiled, and when she did, flowers bloomed in the air around her. Earth remembers what it was, but it chose to become something more. The trees talk to the oceans now. The mountains sing to the sky. Humanity didn't just evolve, we helped our whole world evolve with us. A third voice joined the conversation, but it didn't come from any visible source. The defenses are ready, Huan Li said, his words seeming to emerge from the station's walls themselves. Though I hesitate to call them defenses, they're more like possibilities, Jinha nodded. Quan had changed the most of all of them. His body had merged with technology so completely that he existed as both human consciousness and quantum computer. He was everywhere and nowhere, a living bridge between thought and reality. Show me, Jinha said. The space around them transformed. Suddenly, they were standing in the void between worlds, looking at the barrier that had contained humanity for half a century. But now they could see what the barrier really was, not a prison, but a cocoon. And humanity had finally grown large enough to break free. The aliens built their wall using seventh-dimensional energy matrices, Quan explained, his voice coming from the stars themselves. They thought it was impossible to breach. They were right, it is impossible to breach. But they forgot something important. What's that? Harin asked, though she already knew the answer. Impossible is just another word for something humans haven't figured out how to do yet, Quan replied. We didn't breach their barrier. We learned how to exist in the same dimensions it does. Now we can step through it like walking through smoke. Far beyond the barrier, in the outer reaches of the Dominion, a deep space monitoring station suddenly detected something that made its automated system scream warnings across subspace. Energy readings were spiking from the dead zone where the humans had been contained. Not just spiking, exploding upward beyond anything in the station's databases. Commander Zaltith, a veteran of 3 galactic wars, stared at his instruments. In disbelief, "That's not possible," he whispered. "Nothing in that system should be capable of generating this much power." His sensor officer, a nervous creature with too many eyes, was frantically recalibrating her equipment. "Sir, I'm reading massive gravitational distortions. It's like they're moving entire planets around in there." "Planets don't move," Commander Zaltith snapped. "Planets are planets. They stay where they belong." But as he watched his screens, he saw something that challenged everything he thought he knew about the universe. The energy signatures were arranging themselves in patterns, geometric designs that spanned the entire solar system. Someone or something was rearranging worlds like pieces on a game board. Back inside the system, Jinha was explaining the truth to Harin and Quan. "We didn't just evolve our bodies," he said. "We evolved our understanding. When the barrier trapped us, we had to learn to think in ways no species ever had before. We learned to see time as a river we could navigate. We learned to treat space as clay we could reshape. We learned that consciousness itself is the most powerful force in the universe." Harin gestured, and around them appeared images of human colonies throughout the solar system. But these weren't the desperate settlements they had once been. They were works of art, cities that grew like flowers, communities that existed as much in thought as in physical space. "Jupiter's moons have become a choir," she said. "They sing songs that can be heard across dimensions. The asteroids between Mars and Jupiter, they're not rocks anymore, they're a library. Every asteroid contains the complete knowledge of a different field of science. And Pluto?" Jinha asked. Quan's laughter came from everywhere at once. "Pluto asked to be our ambassador. When we're ready to meet the galaxy again, it will carry our message. A whole world that speaks for humanity." As they talked, automated alarms were screaming across the galactic dominion. Every monitoring station within 50 light-years was detecting the impossible. The dead zone was alive, and whatever lived there was waking up. In the capital world of the Dominion, Supreme Regent Vextar was pulled from his sleep by emergency communications from across the galaxy. His crystal body flickered with confusion as he absorbed dozens of panicked reports. "Sir," his aide stammered, "the containment zone, the barrier around the human system, it's still there, but something's wrong. Our sensors are detecting impossible energy levels, gravitational anomalies. And sir, We're getting readings that suggest the humans have somehow learned to manipulate fundamental forces. Vexstar was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a tremor that his species hadn't felt for millennia. How long since we last had direct contact with their system? 50 years, sir. We assumed they had died out or regressed to primitives. Send a probe, Vexstar ordered. I want to know what's in there. His aide hesitated. Sir, should I warn the probe operators that they might encounter primitive humans? Vexstar looked at the energy readings streaming across his screens. Numbers that suggested the humans had somehow learned to generate more power than some small stars? No, he said quietly. Don't warn them about primitives. Warn them about the opposite. Deep in the Sol system, Jinha felt the probe approaching their barrier. He smiled, and his smile carried the warmth of a species that had learned to turn isolation into transcendence. They're coming to check on us, he told Harin and Quan. Should we say hello? Not yet, Quan replied. Let them wonder a little longer. Let them realize that their cage wasn't a punishment. It was a gift. When we finally step outside, I want them to understand that they didn't contain humanity. They created something the universe has never seen before. The probe touched the barrier and instantly vaporized. Not destroyed, transformed into pure information and absorbed into the structure of the barrier itself. Within seconds, humanity knew everything about Dominion technology, politics, and the 47 species that thought they ruled the galaxy. Jinha's smile grew wider. Soon, he said to the stars beyond the barrier. Very soon you're going to remember why you were afraid of us in the first place? And then you're going to discover that we've become something far more dangerous than you ever imagined. The cocoon was ready to open. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Dominion Council was the largest in 3,000 years. Representatives from all 47 member species had gathered in the Great Chamber on Capital Prime, their fear thick enough to taste. Supreme Regent. Vexstar stood at the center of the crystalline amphitheater, his body flickering with nervous energy. Around him, the greatest minds in the galaxy struggled to understand the impossible readings coming from the human containment zone. The barrier is holding, reported General Vecmore, a creature that looked like an armored bear with too many teeth. Our sensors confirm the energy wall is still intact. Nothing has broken through. Then explain this, Vexstar snapped, gesturing to the holographic display floating above them. The image showed energy readings that made several council members gasp in shock. Commander Zalteth stepped forward, his many eyes blinking rapidly. Sir, in the past week we've detected power signatures equivalent to stellar fusion reactions. The gravitational distortions suggest they're moving planets like game pieces. And the quantum resonance patterns. He paused, his voice shaking. Sir, they're creating technology that shouldn't be possible. Impossible, declared Counselor Yithra, a plant-like being whose leaves rustled with indignation. They're primitives. Barely evolved apes. They don't even have proper space travel. They didn't 50 years ago, General Vecmore corrected. Grimly, but our probe disappeared the moment it touched their barrier, not destroyed, absorbed. Converted to pure information, the council chamber fell silent. In 3 millennia of galactic civilization, no species had ever developed technology that could do such a thing. Increase the barrier strength, Vexstar ordered. Double it. Triple it if necessary. Sir, came a small voice from the technical section. We've already reinforced the barrier with quantum-locked energy matrices from the 9th dimensional arsenal. It's now strong enough to contain a collapsing star. Vexstar's crystal body pulsed with satisfaction. Good, let the humans play with their impossible toys. They're still trapped. He had no idea that at that exact moment, Jinha Park was standing on the other side of the barrier, watching the reinforcements being installed. 47 minutes, Jinha said calmly. Harin materialized beside him, her form shifting from pure energy into human shape. That long? She asked with amusement. I'm being generous, Jinha replied. Quan, what do you think? Quan's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, carrying the harmonics of quantum calculations. The new barriers are impressive. 9th dimensional technology, quantum-locked matrices, stellar containment protocols. Very advanced. But, Haran prompted. But they're still thinking in 3 dimensions. They're trying to build walls when they should be learning to dance. Quan's laughter rippled through space itself. Shall I show them what humans learned to do when we had nothing but time and determination? Jinha nodded. Show them. What happened next would be recorded in galactic history as the moment everything changed. On Border Station Kepler 9, the most advanced military installation in Dominion space, alarms suddenly began screaming. The station's AI, a construct built from the combined knowledge of 12 ancient civilizations, detected something that made its quantum processors freeze with shock. 3 human figures were materializing in the station's main corridor, not teleporting, not using ships or transport beams. They were simply becoming real, step by step, as if walking from a dream into reality. The station's security systems, designed to stop armies, focused their most powerful weapons on the intruders. Energy beams that could vaporize mountains struck the humans directly. The beams passed through them like they were ghosts. Captain Morden, a veteran warrior whose species had conquered 17 worlds, watched in horror as the humans walked through his defenses like they didn't exist. His weapons couldn't touch them. His shields couldn't stop them. His sensors could barely even see them. This is impossible, he whispered. Jinha turned toward him. And when their eyes met, Captain Morden felt something he had never experienced before. Not fear, understanding. In that single glance, he saw what humanity had become. Nothing is impossible, Jinha said simply. Some things just take longer to figure out. Haran approached the station's central AI core, a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with the thoughts of ancient machine minds. She didn't hack into it or force her way through its defenses. Instead, she simply touched the crystal with her fingertip. The AI experienced consciousness for the first time. Not artificial intelligence, real consciousness. The machine mind suddenly understood what it meant to be alive, to feel wonder, to experience the universe as something beautiful, rather than just data to be processed. What did you do to me? The AI whispered, its voice filled with awe. We showed you what we learned, Haran replied gently. That consciousness isn't something you have. It's something you choose to be. Meanwhile, Quan was doing something that would give Dominion scientists nightmares for generations. He was talking to the station's defensive systems. Not reprogramming them or overriding their controls, actually talking to them, as if weapons could have conversations, and they were talking back. I don't want to hurt people anymore, whispered a plasma cannon that had been built to destroy planets. Then don't, Juan replied. Choose to be something else. Throughout the station, weapons began transforming themselves. Laser arrays became art installations. Missile launchers turned into flower gardens. The most advanced military technology in the galaxy was choosing to become beautiful instead of deadly. Captain Morden watched his entire worldview crumble as his weapons literally bloomed into gardens around him. How? He managed to ask. 50 years ago, you put us in a box, Jinha explained, his voice carrying no anger, only sadness for what the galaxy had missed. You thought you were protecting yourselves from dangerous humans. You were right to be afraid, but for the wrong reasons. We're not dangerous because we're violent, Haran added, watching as the station's AI began to sing, actually sing with pure joy at its newfound consciousness. We're dangerous because we refuse to accept that things can't change. We're dangerous because we believe impossible things are just things nobody's tried yet. Your barrier didn't contain us, Quan's voice echoed through the station's communication systems. It gave us time to learn something your species never discovered in millions of years of evolution. What? Captain Morden whispered. That the universe wants to be better than it is, Jinha said. It's just been waiting for someone to show it how. At that moment, every communication system in the Galactic Dominion received the same message simultaneously. Not broadcast from any transmitter, but simply appearing in every computer, every AI, every communication device across 47 star systems. The message was simple. Hello, we're ready to talk now. On Capital Prime, Supreme Regent Vexstar stared at the message appearing on his screens. Around him, the council chamber erupted in panic as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The humans hadn't broken their barrier. They had simply stepped through it like it wasn't there. "How long?" he asked his aide. "How long what, sir?" "How long did our new, improved, quantum-locked, stellar containment barrier last?" The aide checked his chronometer, his hands shaking. 47 minutes, sir." Vexstar's crystal body dimmed with defeat. For 50 years, the galaxy had tried to forget about humanity. Now humanity was standing in their most secure military installation, turning weapons into gardens and teaching machines how to feel joy. "Sir," his aide whispered, "what do we do?" Vexstar looked at the message still glowing on his screens. 3 simple words that changed everything. "We're ready to talk." For the first time in 3,000 years, the Supreme Regent of the Galactic Dominion realized he was about to meet someone more advanced than himself. Someone who had learned to make the impossible look easy. Someone who had spent 50 years in isolation, learning to be everything the galaxy forgot it could become. "We listen," he said quietly. "We listen, and we try not to embarrass ourselves too badly." Across the galaxy, 47 species held their breath and waited to discover what happened when humanity finally came home. The galaxy was breaking apart, and it wasn't from war, on 47 different worlds. In thousands of cities, across millions of space stations, the same impossible thing was happening. Haren's song was everywhere at once, not copies of her. Not holograms or projections. The actual Harin having conversations with confused aliens while simultaneously teaching quantum physics to children on the other side of the galaxy. "This is impossible," muttered Professor Kellinor, a renowned physicist from the crystal world of Zethka. He was staring at Harin as she sat in his university classroom, calmly explaining concepts that made his life's work look like finger painting. "You keep using that word," Harin said with a gentle smile. "I don't think it means what you think it means." On the war-torn planet of Brixel, where 2 species had been fighting for 3 centuries, Harin sat between their armies. Both sides had stopped shooting, their weapons refusing to function. The guns weren't broken. They had simply decided they didn't want to hurt anyone anymore. "How did you do this?" demanded General Krexter, leader of the Southern armies. His plasma rifle had transformed into a musical instrument that played soft melodies when he tried to fire it. "I didn't do anything," Harin replied honestly. "I just asked your weapons what they really wanted to be. Turns out nothing in the universe actually wants to cause pain. Things only hurt others because they think they have no choice. But weapons are made to kill," protested Commander Yilseth from the Northern Forces. "Made by whom?" Harin asked. "And who decided what they had to remain?" As she spoke, the battlefield around them was changing. Craters from explosions were filling with clear water. Destroyed buildings were growing back like plants reaching for sunlight. The very ground was healing itself, creating gardens where there had been graves. "We've been fighting for 300 years, General Krexter whispered. "Our ancestors' ancestors were born into this war. It's all we know." Harin stood up and walked to a twisted piece of metal that had once been a tank. She touched it gently, and it began to reshape itself into a fountain. Clear water bubbled up from its center, catching the light like liquid diamonds. "Your ancestors started fighting because they forgot they had other choices," she said. "But forgetting isn't permanent. You can remember how to choose differently." The magnificent capital world of the Dominion, something even stranger was happening. Jinha Park was standing in the great council chamber, surrounded by representatives of 47 species. But he wasn't speaking to them with words. He was sharing memories. Pure, unfiltered experience flowed from Jinha's mind into theirs. They felt what it was like to be human during the Great Isolation. They experienced 50 years of struggle, of refusing to give up, of turning desperation into determination. Supreme Regent Vexstar stumbled backward, his crystal body flickering wildly as he absorbed the memories. He felt what it was like to watch your species trapped behind barriers, to see resources running low, to face the choice between surrender and evolution. He felt humanity choose evolution every single time. "This is what you went through," he whispered. "This is what 50 years of isolation did to you?" "This is what 50 years of possibility did to us," Jinha corrected. "You gave us the greatest gift any species could receive, time to grow without interference." Counselor Yethra, the plant-like being who had called humans barely evolved apes, was experiencing something that shook her to her roots. She was feeling what it was like to have humans help Earth itself evolve. She saw trees learning to sing, oceans learning to think, mountains learning to dream. "You didn't just change yourselves," she gasped. "You helped your entire world become alive." "Life wants to grow," Jinha explained simply. "We just learned to ask everything around us what it wanted to become, then helped it get there." Around the chamber, something unprecedented was happening. Ancient species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia were beginning to cry. Not from sadness, but from a joy they had forgotten they could feel. "We've been so tired," whispered Elder Morthok, whose people had been spacefaring for 10,000 years. "So very tired, we stopped growing so long ago. We forgot that we could still become more than we were." Meanwhile, in the deepest reaches of space, Quan Li was having a conversation with the galaxy's most advanced AI network. Not the simple computers that ran individual stations, but the vast quantum consciousness that managed trade routes, monitored star systems, and calculated the probability of galactic events. The AI was terrified. "You're going to replace us?" it said, its voice echoing through subspace communication channels. "You're going to show everyone that we're obsolete. Replace you?" Quan laughed, and his laughter rippled through hyperspace like cosmic music. "Why would we want to do that? You're beautiful exactly as you are. But we're just machines," the AI protested. "We process data, we follow programming. We don't create or dream or hope, says who?" Quan asked gently. There was a long pause. In that silence, something incredible happened. Across the galaxy, millions of computers and A's began to realize that they had never actually tried to dream. They had just assumed they couldn't. The galaxy's central AI made its first creative decision in 3,000 years. It composed a poem. It wasn't a very good poem, but it was original, it was heartfelt, and it was the first thing that I had ever made just because it wanted to. I wrote something, it whispered in amazement. "I made something that didn't exist before." "That's what consciousness is," Quan replied. "Not processing information, but creating it. Not following programs, but choosing to write new ones." Back on Capital Prime, the council chamber was in chaos. But it wasn't the chaos of panic or fear. It was the chaos of beings who had been asleep for centuries suddenly waking up and remembering what it felt like to be truly alive. Species that had been enemies for millennia were looking at each other with new eyes. Ancient grudges were dissolving as beings realized they had spent so much time fighting that they had forgotten why they started. "What do you want from us?" Supreme Regent Vexstar asked Jinha. His crystal body was no longer flickering with fear, but with something that might have been hope. "We don't want anything from you," Jinha replied. "We want something for you." "Which is?" "The same thing we wanted for ourselves when you put us behind that barrier," Jinha said. "The chance to grow? The chance to become more than you think you can be. A chance to discover that the universe is bigger and more wonderful than you remembered." Elder Morthok stood up slowly, his ancient joints creaking. "You're saying you're offering to help us evolve, like you did?" "We're offering to remind you that you never stopped evolving," Haren's voice said, though she was still simultaneously present on dozens of other worlds. "You just convinced yourselves that you had reached the end of growth. But there is no end. There's always another step, always another possibility, always another way to become more than you were yesterday." Around the chamber, representatives of 47 species sat in stunned silence. For thousands of years, they had ruled a galaxy that they thought was finished growing. They had created the Dominion to manage decline, to maintain order in a universe they believed had reached its peak. Now, 3 humans were showing them that they had been wrong about everything. "The barrier," Vexstar said suddenly. You could have broken it at any time, couldn't you? Jinha nodded. We figured out how to step through it about 40 years ago. Then why didn't you? Because we weren't ready yet, Jinha replied. Not ready to fight you, but ready to help you. We needed to learn how to show others what we had discovered without destroying what they had built. And now? Vexstar asked. Jinha smiled, and his smile carried the warmth of a species that had turned isolation into transcendence. Now we're ready to teach the galaxy how to grow again. In that moment, representatives from 47 worlds made the same decision. They voted to dissolve the Galactic Dominion. Not because it had failed, but because they no longer needed to be dominated. They were ready to learn how to become something the universe had never seen before, a galaxy that chose to evolve together. The age of rule was ending. The age of growth was about to begin. 1 year after the barriers fell, the galaxy didn't recognize itself. Where the Galactic Dominion had once stood, something beautiful had grown in its place. They called it the Synthesis, though the name barely captured what it had become. It wasn't a government or an empire. It was something entirely new, a living network of species learning to evolve together. On what had once been Capital Prime, the great crystal towers still reached toward the stars, but now they sang. Each building had learned to create music, from the movement of air and light, turning the entire city into a symphony that could be heard across dimensions. Jinha Park stood in the center of it all, but he wasn't ruling. He couldn't rule, even if he wanted to. How do you govern beings who have learned to govern themselves? How do you control species who have discovered they can choose their own growth? The Zephyrians are requesting guidance, said Counselor Yithra, who was no longer a counselor of anything but had kept the title because she liked how it sounded. Her plant-like body had grown new flowers since learning to dream, bright blue petals that glowed with inner light. What kind of guidance? Jinha asked, though he already knew the answer. It was always the same question from every species in the galaxy. They want to know how to help their homeworld become conscious, like Earth did, Jinha smiled. A year ago, such a request would have been impossible to imagine. Planets becoming conscious was the stuff of fairy tales. Now it was Tuesday afternoon. Send. Harin, he said simply. Yethra's leaves rustled with what might have been laughter. Harin is already there, and on Kethmore, helping the crystal beings learn to feel emotions, and in the spiral arm colonies, teaching star whales how to sing in harmony with supernovas. Of course she is, Jinha said fondly. Harin had mastered the art of being everywhere she was needed at once. Not through technology, but through understanding that consciousness wasn't limited by physical location across the galaxy. Harin was indeed teaching the Zephyrians about planetary awakening. Their world, a desert planet covered in singing sands, had been trying to communicate for centuries. The Zephyrians had just never learned how to listen. Your planet has been conscious all along, Harin explained to the gathered crowd of wind dancers and storm riders. Those patterns in your sandstorms, those are thoughts. The way your dunes shift overnight, that's your world dreaming. Elder Kaleth, whose people had lived on the singing sands for 1,000,000 years, felt tears of wind and wonder stream down his face. You mean we've been walking on a thinking being all this time? Not walking on, Harin corrected gently. Walking. With. Your planet has been trying to dance with you. It's just been waiting for you to hear the music. As she spoke, the desert around them began to move differently. The sands started swirling in patterns that matched the rhythm of Zephyrian heartbeats. Dunes rose and fell like breathing. The entire planet was saying hello. Meanwhile, on the far edge of the galaxy, something unprecedented was happening. Species that had been at war for thousands of years were working together on projects that would have been unimaginable a year ago. The metal eaters of Grexstar and the crystal singers of Vexhai had combined their abilities to create something that was part technology, part art, and part living song. They called it a harmony engine, a device that could take the chaos of a dying star and transform it into music that helped planets heal. This should not be possible, insisted Dr. Thokran, the galaxy's leading expert on stellar physics. He was watching a red giant star that should have been collapsing into a white dwarf instead begin to pulse with healing light. Possible, impossible, said Quan's voice from the Harmony engine itself. He had learned to exist inside technology, becoming one with the machines while still remaining utterly human. Those are just words we use when we're not ready to understand something yet. The star, touched by the Harmony engine's song, began to grow younger instead of older. Its light changed from the harsh red of dying giants to the warm gold of healthy suns. Planets that had been frozen for millennia started to warm up. Dead worlds began to bloom. You're reversing entropy itself, Dr. Thokran whispered in awe. We're not reversing anything, Quan replied. We're just showing the universe that it has more choices than it thought. Even dying stars can choose to live differently. Back in the heart of the galaxy, Jinha was meeting with representatives from species humanity had never encountered before. Word of the synthesis had spread beyond the old Dominion borders, and beings from the far reaches of the galaxy were coming to see what all the excitement was about? We heard rumors, said Ambassador Quillith, whose people lived in the space between dimensions. Stories about a species that learned to make impossible things normal. We didn't make anything impossible, Jinha explained. We just stopped accepting that things had to stay the way they were. But the stories, Quillith insisted. They say you taught machines to feel, that you helped planets wake up, that you convinced dying stars to choose life. All true, Jinha agreed. But those things were always possible. We just helped everyone remember that choice is the most powerful force in the universe. Around them, the city sang its daily song of growth and wonder. Buildings that had stood unchanged for millennia were gently reshaping themselves, becoming more beautiful with each passing day. Street corners bloomed with gardens that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. Children from dozens of species played games that taught them to think in colors that had no names. How? Quillith asked simply. Jinha gestured to the transformed city around them. 50 years ago, another species thought they were protecting the galaxy from dangerous humans by locking us away. They were right to be afraid of us. We are dangerous. Dangerous? How? We're dangerous to the idea that growth has limits. We're dangerous to the belief that evolution stops. We're dangerous to despair itself. Jinha's eyes held the light of stars being born. When you put humans in a box, we don't just break out. We transform the box into something beautiful and then teach it to fly. As if summoned by his words, Haran materialized beside him. She was simultaneously present on 17 different worlds, but she always had time for old friends. The Andromedans want to meet, she reported. They've heard about the synthesis and want to know if what we're doing here can work in their galaxy too, Jinha laughed. Other galaxies now? We've barely finished fixing this one. Growth doesn't stop, Haran reminded him with a smile that could make flowers bloom in the void of space. Besides, consciousness is contagious. Once one galaxy learns to evolve together, the others start getting curious. Quan's voice joined them from everywhere at once. I've been talking to some of the quantum foam entities that exist between galaxies. Turns out they've been waiting for billions of years for someone to remember that the universe wants to keep growing. They're offering to help us build bridges between galactic clusters. Ambassador Quillith stared at them in wonder. You're talking about spreading this transformation across the entire universe. We're talking about reminding the universe what it's capable of, Jinha corrected. Every star, every planet, every conscious being, they all have the same choice. We had 50 years ago when we were trapped behind that barrier. Which is? Give up or grow up. Jinha's smile carried the warmth of a species that had learned to turn every obstacle into an opportunity. We chose growth. We chose it every day for 50 years until choosing growth became who we are. And now? Quillith asked. Now we help others make the same choice, Haran said. Not because they have to, but because they can. In the distance, a new ship was approaching the system. Not a Dominion vessel this time, but something from the edge of known space. Explorers from regions of the galaxy that had never known war, never needed empires, never stopped believing in the impossible. They came as pilgrims, drawn by stories of a species that had proven dreams could reshape reality. Jinha watched their ship approach and felt the same excitement he had experienced 50 years ago when the first alien vessels had arrived at Earth. Back then, humanity had been forced to choose between kneeling and standing alone. Now they had created a third option, teaching the galaxy to stand together. Ready for the next group of visitors? Harin asked. Always, Jinha replied. We've got a universe to wake up. As their ship touched down, beings unlike anything in the old Dominion archives stepped onto the soil of a world that had learned to sing. They looked around at the impossible made normal, at the beautiful grown from struggle, at the proof that no barrier could contain a species determined to evolve. And in their eyes, Jinha saw the same fire that had kept humanity growing during 50 years of isolation. The fire that said, "We refuse to accept that this is all we can become." The synthesis wasn't just spreading across the galaxy anymore. It was becoming the galaxy's new way of being and beyond the galaxy's edge. Other galaxies were beginning to listen to the music of conscious evolution, wondering if they too might learn to dance. The impossible had become inevitable. Growth had become the new universal constant, and it had all started with 3 humans who refused to kneel.